very happy to see elections taking place in the country. While many await the poll results with careful optimism, others are expecting more of the same.
I have no hope from the government. Previously, I'd placed my hope on the leaders. They all turned out to be bloody thieves.
Nepal's Election Commission has promised to release results within days. Rebecca Johnston, ABC News.
Thousands of delegates from across China have gathered in the capital for the National People's Congress. Beijing has made a rare acknowledgement of economic headwinds, setting its lowest growth target in more than 3 decades.
From all corners of the country, they arrived in snowy Beijing. The Communist Party government out to show that China is a beacon of stability as the US upends the global order.
Amidst profound and complex developments, both at home and abroad, the Party Central Committee, with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, rallied the Chinese people.
In front of the carefully choreographed Congress, China's second in charge, who's responsible for the economy, was eager to sell the country's achievements.
The main goals in 2025 were accomplished, and solid new strides were made in advancing Chinese modernisation.
But in an unexpected acknowledgement of continuing economic headwinds, the Premier announced the lowest economic target in decades.
Economic growth of 4.5 to 5%.
This meeting is the only time that foreign journalists are allowed access to politicians.
Sorry.
But a couple were willing to talk.
The GDP target is merely a planning figure. However, I am confident that our overall economy will continue to grow.
There'll be extra attention on the outcomes of this year's Congress, in particular from Western leaders who've recently set to rebuild relations with Beijing in the face of what they say is global instability caused by the United States and its President, Donald Trump. Alison Horn, ABC News, Beijing.
Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney has used a major speech in Parliament to issue a call for middle powers to band together in the face of coercion from superpowers. But the Middle East war has loomed over the visit. Mr Carney and Anthony Albanese have both called for de-escalation, but is not pressing for a ceasefire. Here's Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts.
Far-flung friends gathering against a backdrop of war. Mark Carney greeted like family at Australia's Parliament.
Though we could not be further physically apart, Canada and Australia are strategic cousins.
The distance between our two nations has never mattered less, and the closeness of our values has never mattered more.
But the world outside is more dangerous and uncertain, both leaders grappling with the spreading disorder and violence in the Middle East. But neither are calling for a ceasefire, at least for now.
I want to see the possibility of Iran getting a nuclear weapon removed once and for all.
Before there can be a ceasefire, there needs to be a de-escalation of hostilities. Right now we have a spreading of hostilities.
Both countries know they risk becoming mere bystanders as great powers become more willing to wield economic power and deploy military force. Mr Carney using his speech to Parliament to revive his call for middle powers like Canada and Australia to form new coalitions.
The question today for middle powers like us is whether we establish the conventions and help write the new rules that will determine our security and prosperity, or let the hegemons dictate outcomes.
For all the talk of middle powers, the brute reality is that Canada and Australia will remain dependent in important ways on both the US and China for years to come. The question is, what red lines can they draw and how can they try to enforce them? For now, the steps are modest, the two countries penning new agreements on critical minerals, vaccines, emergency management, and agreeing to set up a defence ministers' meeting.
Australia and Canada have never waited for others to write our futures.
When the rules no longer protect you, you have to protect yourself. Stephen Jedgetts, ABC News, Canberra.
US President Donald Trump says they are making tremendous progress in Iran and that they're in a very strong position. The Defence Secretary earlier confirmed one of its submarines sank an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean. We are joined now by Middle East analyst Dr. Roger Shanahan. Dr. Shanahan, the US has confirmed this submarine sank an Iranian warship that thought it was safe in international waters. Under rules of engagement, the US did have a right to target this vessel?
Well, you'd have to know what the rules of engagement were. I'm not a legal expert, so the issue has happened. So I think at the end of the day, we'll work out whether it was legal and whether it was justified in doing that.
Well, US President Trump has said outright he wants to destroy Iran's naval capabilities. What will that take?
Iran didn't have a particularly strong navy. They've said they've, I think, sunk around 20 vessels. Effectively, it's degraded to the point that it's not a real capability. It was a marginal capability to start with. It's one of the several justifications for this military campaign, and they seem to be prosecuting that line of operation.
How is Iran controlling traffic through the Strait of Hormuz at the moment? Tell us, what are exploding drone boats it's reportedly using?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen those reports. There's been talk about looking at the Straits of Hormuz or blocking them. But yeah, I'm not really across that issue at the moment.
Turkey says NATO air defences have destroyed a ballistic missile that Iran fired towards its airspace. How will this conflict continue to expand, in your view?
Well, it's an interesting one about what the rationale for that was. The energy needs, that could have been the target, but given the fact that it was intercepted well before its target site, we're not 100% sure what the target was. We've just seen recent reports about a potential Iranian attack on Azerbaijan, so as well as the Gulf states, we're seeing this conflict spreading outside the immediate area.
And European countries have also begun deploying military assets to the Middle East. At what point do you think NATO might get involved?
No, listen, they all talk about being in a defensive position to protect their own national interests, particularly basing personnel who are in bases in the region. And I think that's probably what we're going to see the limit of in terms of European involvement, a defensive military posture.
A girls' school in Iran was hit by US and Israeli strikes, killing more than 100 children. How did this happen?
Well, listen, it's the fog of war. When you're prosecuting lots of targets, you need completely up-to-date information. The targeting process is not perfect, although people would like to say that it is. And I think, there are reports that it's a US targeting error. The US would be well aware if it was or not. They're not saying that it was them. They're just saying it's being investigated. They might have to investigate how it happened, but they would be well and truly aware at this point whether it was one of their munitions that destroyed that girls' school.
And Donald Trump says the US is making tremendous progress and that Iran's leadership is rapidly going. Would you agree with this assessment?
Well, I don't think anybody really knows what the state of the Iranian leadership is at the moment, other than the Iranian leadership themselves. Certainly, there's a massive aerial campaign going on that really has air supremacy, so it is able to prosecute a large number of targets. Iranian military capabilities being degraded hour by hour. Exactly what that means for the national will, that's a completely different issue, and that's a really subjective measure, and I don't think political leaders have a really good grasp on what people think. They have a good grasp on what targets are being prosecuted, but not what people think.
Just finally, how close do you think the US is to taking complete control of Iranian airspace?
Well, I think they've really had essentially air supremacy from day one. You know, Iranians' air force was antiquated over the past number of months, particularly after the 12-day air campaign in June. The air defence assets of the Iranians have been degraded to a significant degree. You know, this campaign started with relative air supremacy, not superiority.
Dr. Shanahan, really appreciate your thoughts. Thanks so much for joining us on The World.
My pleasure.
Blackouts have again hit large parts of Cuba, this time caused by an unexpected outage at a power plant east of Havana. It will take days for repairs to be completed, with Cubans forced to rely on emergency generators. The country has experienced a series of major outages in recent years, which its government blames on decades of economic sanctions by the United States. The problem has been compounded by a worsening fuel shortage in recent weeks. A study in Spain has found pregnancy causes significant changes to a woman's brain. The researchers say so-called baby brain is real, but rather than being a cause for concern, the neurological rewiring actually primes the brain for motherhood.
Pregnancy changes so many things, almost every part of the body, but little is known about how it changes the brain. Now, scientists in Spain have scanned the brains of 127 women before, during and after pregnancy.
What we found in this study is that women's brain change profoundly during pregnancy, that those changes are dynamic.
So what I'm looking at here, you've got the grey matter outlined in red.
Yes.
You've got the white matter in blue, and you're interested in the area of that grey matter.
Yes.
The grey matter in the brain is a nerve-rich layer that plays a crucial role in things like processing information, emotions and empathy. When they put the average results of the scans together on one graph, this is what it looked like. For women who weren't pregnant, their grey matter stayed fairly steady. But for women who were pregnant, the grey matter decreased by about 5% before gradually coming back up.
I know it sounds like a bad thing, but it does not necessarily needs to be a bad thing, as in the brain, as in life as well. Sometimes less is better. We usually use the metaphor of a tree in which you have a lot of branches and you start pruning some of the branches so the tree can grow up through the main one, the more important ones.
The scientists found the more the brains changed on the scans, the more likely the women were to report feeling content and well bonded with their babies. And the results so far suggest hormones play a key role in the way the brain changes. For these women who took part in the study, this early research is changing how they view motherhood.
I think it is time that we start rethinking how we're treating mothers. They're undergoing tremendous transformation, and we need to approach them as someone who is, coming outside of a cocoon, becoming something different, and just be very accepting that this is happening to them and that we should be there to hold their hands and enjoy and cherish who they're becoming.
Australians are still prepared to pay more for their children's education despite the cost of living crunch. Parents are continuing to abandon
2.5 times more than the OECD average to send their kids to high school.
I don't think it's a good news story.
Emma Rowe says unfair funding is shortchanging public education and warns the almost 40% of parents going private that fees are rising faster than inflation.
We also have this kind of, it's like a tinderbox of problems that's going to explode in terms of a rising cost of tuition fees.
Behavioural economist Dean Pearson says his long-term research shows parents are attracted by extra wellbeing support.
More often than not, they will also talk about counsellors, pastoral care, spirituality.
And it's a cost parents will go to great lengths to absorb.
We really love our children, we love our pets, and they're the two categories that they'll say, look, if I have to cut back on anything,